The Prime Minister says no NIB rate increases will happen right now. The U.S. Human Rights Reports laments violence against women has increased in the Bahamas, and Omar Archer returns to court. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Simonet with your Jcn News for this Wednesday, April 13th. Prime Minister Philip Davis seeking to clarify recent statements made by the Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister, Miles Regatta, that he expects National Insurance Board contributions to increase by 1.5 to 2% in the next year. The Prime Minister says he knows what the Bahamian people are experiencing, that these are difficult times, and raising of the NIB rates would be a last resort for him to put any more burden on their backs.
The actuaries over the last 10-15 years have been predicting that the fund is jeopardized because of us not having raised the contributions to NIB. Recommendations were being made from 2003-04 that we should raise the contributions. Yes, we are at that watershed moment, but I am not going to, at this time, put any further burden on the Bahamian people. We'll see how we could be innovative and creative to ensure that we do not do such or embrace such an initiative until we have brought the relief that is necessary to allow that to happen.
Minister Regatta informed reporters yesterday that NIB has been running deficits for the past 6 years, and this issue has predated COVID-19. The Prime Minister says that Minister Regatta was only speaking on what was found in the reports.
The Minister of State in my office was just speaking the facts as what was said in the actual report. They are recommending and they are urging that we do so. And as was his duty, he is bringing that report to Cabinet for us to look at it and discuss it. We will consider it, but insofar as what my views are on it, is not going to happen, not now, not until we have brought the relief to our Bahamian people.
The Prime Minister says his administration must put to bed some of the issues that may keep Bahamians awake at night before any increase happens. As it stands, NIB contributions are at 9.8%. Of that, 5.9% is paid by the employers and 3.9% is paid by the employee. Some interesting findings coming out of a recent human rights report from the U.S. State Department. Our Leah Cooper combed through the report today and files this report.
Violence against women worsened during the COVID-19 pandemic due in part to lockdowns and curfews that prevented victims from seeking safe havens or other assistance. This according to the U.S. Department of State's most recent human rights report issued yesterday. It adds that the government did not implement long-standing civil society recommendations to address gender-based violence. The report notes that rape of men or women is illegal, but the law does not protect against spousal rape unless the couple is separated or in the process of divorce, or unless there is a restraining order in place. The maximum penalty for an initial rape conviction is 7 years in prison. The maximum sentence for subsequent rape convictions is life imprisonment. However, the usual sentence is 14 years in prison. It says the government generally enforced the law effectively, except at the detention facility and the safe house. The report further states that the government generally enforced the law on gender-based violence, although women's rights groups cited reluctance by police to intervene in domestic dispute. The Ministry of Social Services sponsored temporary privately owned safe house shelters, but there was a shortage of transitional housing. The Bahamas Crisis Center provided a counseling referral service, operated a toll-free hotline, and managed a WhatsApp hotline during the year. In terms of sexual harassment, the report says sexual harassment was a serious problem, adding that the law prohibits sexual harassment in employment and authorizes moderate penalties and a maximum of 2 years imprisonment. It says the government generally enforced the law effectively. However, sexual harassment was underreported. The government did not have any permanent programs on sexual harassment, but conducted educational campaigns. As for reproductive rights, the report found that there were no reports of coerced abortion abortion or involuntary sterilization on the part of government authorities. It says barriers affecting access to contraception included limited access to sexual reproductive health services on all but the two most populated islands, that's New Providence and Grand Bahama, and socio-cultural stigma regarding premarital sex. The age for heterosexual consent is 16, 18 for homosexual consent, but the age for receiving contraception and other health services without requiring parental consent is 18. The report says the government provided limited access to sexual and reproductive health services for survivors of sexual violence, including the provision of emergency contraception. Reporting for Jcn News, I'm Leah Cooper.
Thanks, Leah. Minister of National Security Wayne Munroe made a complaint to the police that political activist Omar Archer defamed his character when he took to social media, mainly WhatsApp, to make several bold claims against the minister regarding his personal life. Archer then returned to social media and threatened to release damaging information about Mr. Munroe unless he dropped the complaint. Subsequently, a police wanted poster for Mr. Archer was released. He was recently arrested and charged before the magistrate's court. He returned today for bail hearing. Drino Saunders was in court on Wednesday and filed this report.
Former Contractors Registrar in the Ministry of Works, Omar Archer, 50 years old, appeared in court number 10 on South Street Wednesday morning before Magistrate Kendra Kelly, who was set to make a determination on bail following charges of libel and defamation of character against the Minister of National Security, Wayne Munroe. On Monday, Archer pleaded not guilty to those charges. On Monday, prosecutor Vernon Pyfrom objected to bail, arguing that Archer was already on bail for a similar matter in court number 5. The judge moved the case to Wednesday when she was expected to make a determination on bail. However, when the case resumed on Wednesday, in addition to charges of libel against Wayne Munroe, the prosecution levied an additional charge of abetment to encourage others to cause harm to Wayne Munroe, Shakara Davis, and 2 minors. Again, Mr. Archer, dressed in a black and gray sweatsuit, pleaded not guilty. He then accused the prosecution of trumping up charges against him to try and keep him behind bars. Speaking to the magistrate, Mr. Archer expressed concerns over the separation of powers between the government and the judiciary, which he said lines were being blurred based on the new charges he only learned about in court on Wednesday. Again, the prosecution objected to bail for the new charges, giving the same reasons that Mr. Archer is already on bail for a similar charge. However, Mr. Archer was able to produce a receipt from the Privy Council showing that he had applied for an appeal in the matter that was in court number 5, which caused bail in that matter to be stayed. Although the current status of the appeal to the Privy Council is unknown, Magistrate Kelly noted that the charge of libel and causing harm which were before her are both bailable. Thus, she granted Archer bail in the amount of $8,000 with 1 or 2 suretors. Under the conditions of bail, Mr. Archer must report to the East Street South Police Station every Wednesday before 6 p.m. He must also stay away from social media in general, and more specifically, make no voice notes, video, photographic, or written statements on social media about the case or the virtual complainants, Wayne Munroe and Shakara Davis, or bail will be revoked. Drino Saunders, Jcn News.
Thanks, Drino. Off the heels of last month's record-breaking homicide numbers, General Superintendent of the Highway Church of God, Bishop Denzil joins with the nation in grieving with the families of those victims. He adds that while this time has been painful for all of us, it was also an eye-opener.
That we ought to be on our assignment, especially as men of God. I pastor in the inner city. And so there are young men in my church that were affected to the point where some have come to me in a place of fear, panic. That was my boy. I went to school with him, or I used to hang with them. We used to do certain things together, and so now I'm wondering whether I'm targeted as well, and so I'm afraid to come out. So we've dealt with all of that. So it's been an eye-opening experience, and I think it's a clarion call for all of us that represent the body of Christ to be in position.
That said, he adds that he believes the church should always be aggressive, as its mandate is to go out in the world and do so. In light of this, Bishop Roll says that prayer has been intensified. He also spoke to what we can do to combat crime on an individual level and outside the 4 walls of the church.
We often feel like, boy, I don't know how I can help. What can I do? And you mentioned what we talked about in Bible study, where the Bible says that you are the salt of the earth. He was not talking to a church building. He was talking to believers, that we are the salt of the earth. just that whole act of showing that I care, to say, man, listen, man, love you, man, like understanding that we are 1 or 2 steps removed from being right where they were. Why is this happening? And there are many other factors, many factors that lead to it. In a lot of cases, it's a lack of identity, not knowing that, but you're a king, babe. Not knowing that you were made in the image and likeness of God, not knowing that you have a gift, you have a skill set, you have abilities, and even though you may not have done well when you were in Aaron Bailey or C.R. Walker or C.A. Dreves or Doris, you didn't do well there. But there are still giftings that you have that God has given you with innately, that you can change the world with what you have. And so just identifying the strength, seeing them as humans, seeing them as hurting. I heard this first, I think, from Dr. Allen, who said, hurt people hurt people. And this is true. So understand that there's a hurt there that needs to be ministered to. And when we see them as us, when you see that as my brother, as my sister in some instances, then you realize that all of us are equipped to penetrate.
He encourages all of us to adopt the compassion of Christ to everyone we encounter, as we never know how much a simple, kind gesture can impact someone's life. And it's official, regattas are back. This much comes as the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources and Family Island Affairs announced in a press conference today the return of regattas, homecomings and festivals for the Family Islands. The first of which, the C-Class and E-Class Championship Regattas, set to take place next week in Georgetown, Exuma. Danny Strawn, Commodore of the National Family Island Regatta, details the road leading up to this announcement.
Much has happened over the last several weeks since the government decided to move to reopen the country, and the announcement that regattas and festival can now take place without restrictions. Sometime before this announcement, we, the members of the National Family Island Regatta Committee, very sadly decided to cancel this year's version of the National Family Island Regatta. Our reasoning for this painful decision was primarily based on a simple fact, namely, since the vast majority of the larger sloops A and B classes had been laid up for 2 years, they would require reconditioning and in some cases expensive and time-consuming repairs. Owners would have been hard-pressed to secure the necessary funding throughout the pandemic. I thought a special championship regatta for the C and E class was possible, but it would require substantial funding from the government for it to meet the standard which fans would expect and require. So therefore, we are here today to confirm that the government and Minister Sweeting has provided the necessary funds, which are supported by
Mr. Strawn notes that the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources and Family Island Affairs is providing about 70% of the funding to host this particular event, with the remaining 30% being provided by various private entities around the country. With this announcement, regatta officials note that there has already been a significant uptick in economic activity on the Family Islands. Minister with responsibility for Family Island Affairs, Clay Sweeting, speaks to the importance of regattas and similar events to the state of affairs on the Family Islands.
Yeah. I've said on numerous occasions that regattas and festivals and homecomings are so important to the Family Islands and the economy. Being from a family island, I understand the need for persons to travel domestically, and I think that's what the Family Islands regatta will do, especially in Exuma. Everything is booked, cars, rentals, everything is booked. And we hope that this excitement continues throughout the Family Islands, and we help to re-engage Family Islanders and create a domestic tourist economy that we once had, and hopefully we can get to that point again.
In addition to the announcement of the return of regattas, Minister Sweeting also hinted to an official declaration of sailing becoming the country's new national sport. The minister notes that Cabinet has already confirmed the change and plans to make a formal announcement in the coming weeks. You're watching Jcn News. Stay with us.